11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
All right, welcome everybody to another Daily Gun Show. Actually, we got the old ho-host back for a bit here. We've got our Tuesday show is a workshop. I've been alternating between like a media workshop and just a Second Amendment workshop. And since this is Every Second Matters, and I was asked to do something by Talk America, I figured we'd turn this into a workshop. And I've invited a lot of people today. We'll see who all shows up, and maybe with a half an hour notice on Tuesday morning. So we'll see who all shows up. I'd like to thank everybody who joins us in the chat out there. This is a participatory effort. Our workshops are always like this. They're not behind a paywall, and they're not just a lecture. They're designed to be interactive. In this case, we're talking about perception and interest and inclusion, maybe like comprehension or something. So, the more we hear from, the better. So with that being said, I'll thank Barbecue for jumping in from Pennsylvania.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite.
You bet. So, and then we got DJ jumping in from Nebraska.
Yeah, how you doing?
All right. So it's been a while since we've been on a show together. So thanks guys for jumping in. I know you guys pay more attention to these issues, these topics than a lot. So I'm sure you've got something to add to this one. But specifically what we're talking about is Walk the Talk America, which is, as it says on the screen here, we're looking at their website, Pro 2A, nonprofit, bridging the gap between mental health and responsible firearm ownership. It goes on further to say Walk the Talk America believes that by improving the quality and availability of mental health resources to gun owners, we can reduce suicide by firearm. We are paving the way by educating mental health professionals about gun culture and breaking negative stigmas around mental health for gun owners. We are saving lives. So I think that pretty much sums it up really well, what Walk the Talk America started to do and has done over the couple of years or past years that they've been around. So with that being said, one of their campaigns or one of their efforts has been, like it says there, to break the negative stigmas around mental health for gun owners. I'd say that's like one side, one arm of their fight, or their challenge and their effort. And the other side of it is, like it says, educating mental health professionals about the gun culture. So in this case, though, we're going to be focusing on the stigmas around mental health for gun owners. And here's the question. Mike sent me this to take a look at. Says, can you give me an opinion on this, the mental health plan we've been discussing? Let me know what we've missed, if you see any language issues. And then he gave me a link. Do you think this is okay to show, or should we just describe it for the podcast and for the show like this? I mean, it's going to go public, but I don't know. It wasn't told not to show it. I'm kind of taking liberty here. What do you guys think?
If it seems clear to go, I say show.
I can see it either way. So sounds like you guys got the 2-0 because my vote's neutral.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of at. I don't know if I'm overstepping or not, but I'm going to show it just because it makes it a little easier. So we're looking at, I'm assuming, and I don't know if this is the final product or if this is just the data from it, but we're looking at maybe a handout, maybe a piece of paper. Looks like it's one side and then the other side, right? And there's formatting. It's got some logos and some different colors and some formatting and stuff. So I'm assuming that this is finished product-ish. But I don't know if you guys need me to read it. I'll read it for the podcast, I suppose. But essentially, it's their logo. Then it says Mental Health Plan, real big. Questions to answer is a subtitle. And then there's like a section in gray here that says, most gun owners diligently prepare for potential threats such as home invasions with detailed plans and training. However, we often overlook a far more probable and impactful issue, our mental health. Statistically, over half of related deaths are due to suicide, Walk the Talk America, we urge you to consider the following questions before they are ever needed. And it goes on to, I guess, I don't know if you call this a questionnaire or would you call this a survey? But I think it's more of a, not like you turn it in, but it's designed to, you walk through it yourself, right? You go through this yourself and help you determine where you're at. But it says the first question here is, how do I plan to stay mentally healthy? It's got an example. Do I store my firearms responsibly? Yes or no question. Then there's a spot here for where you can write something. Who can I rely on to tell me I'm starting to depart from the ordinary? The next one is a question that, as an example, who can be involved in pointing out I'm in a temporary crisis? And then it goes further to kind of explain that and then offer an example and place to write that. And it goes on for maybe 4 or 5 more of those. So with that overall impression, what's your guys' first impression? So I think that's a valuable thing to look at before we start digging in and getting into all the details.
I would like to see it as the impetus for thought, not necessarily for, it's not necessarily direct instruction or call to specific action. I kind of treat it as, yeah, as something to provoke thought and personal consideration.
So I don't need to put anybody on the spot. So I don't know if you got anything to throw on there, barbecue or not, but
No, I've got nothing. DJ pretty much hit the nail on the head. And that's the way I kind of took that first part. Is it's just kind of something, that it's going to provoke thought.
so I guess for me, my first thing when I looked at it, and again, I'm not sure if it's finished or not, right? I just know what they sent me to look at. I'm not reading this. I'm not reading nothing. Like, I'm not reading anything unless, seriously, what am I ever reading? Unless it's like I'm going to court or something, I'm not reading it. So I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's just that, I'm not reading stuff. So my first thing is, what if this was laid out like a brochure or like a pamphlet? Like if you were going to explore new kind of shed or new kind of siding or, comparing 3 different kind of sheds in the backyard, you're going to get like a picture, like a circle with a picture in it and maybe a quick question underneath. So I could see these things being little bubbles and an image that gets you 90% of the way to the, the thought or the point. And then maybe this question underneath, like, just like maybe more specific. But I'm thinking if this is, the main questions are, how do I plan to stay mentally healthy? Who can be involved in pointing out I'm in a temporary crisis? What's my plan to temporarily remove my firearms when I'm trying a new medication that might alter my mental state? One seems very specific. What is my plan if I'm in a mental health crisis to remove my firearms temporarily? What's my plan if someone who lives with me is in a crisis, who is authorized to access my firearms? Again, very specific. And then what is the plan? Well, there's 2 more. What is the plan if the medical or other incident changes my long-term mental health outlook? Who can execute my plan if I'm unable to? And then what is my plan for my firearms if I pass away? Which to me seems, it's like it's super important. We'll either lead with that or not even include it because it's just so different to me than the other ones. The other ones are all like, what if something happens and I change my mental state? This is like a finite for everybody. Like, this is something we all deal with. This is something some people might deal with, right? And they might even not realize they're dealing with it till it's over type of thing. But anyway, now that I've read through them, I don't know if it's necessary to read through all the examples and everything. I think the examples are good for what it's worth. It's not that much to read. It's just, I don't know if it's overwhelming to just try reading this whole pamphlet or this whole page thing. But I'm going to stop here so that you guys can put some input into here. Now that I've read them, though.
Regarding that last thing and what to do in the case, once one expires kind of thing. Again, I think that's to provoke thought, but also each one of these things is that gives us a sense of the personal responsibility for each. And even on our way out the door, literally, it's still a responsibility that we hold. And so I'll pass it at that, and then we can go back to those points.
I didn't catch the second half of this. Slider came in and had to draw my attention, so I am going to be useless on the second half. Sorry.
No worries. It was mostly just questions that are about like what happens to you if something changes your health or your mental state, like along the way. The last question though was, what is my plan for my firearms if I pass away? And I was just saying that almost seems like, one, it shouldn't be included because it's just like different. It's like a separate type of thing, but it's also an eventuality that everybody has to deal with at some point. Whereas the other ones are more like, maybe you have to deal with it. And even if you do have to deal with it, did you deal with it? It's just because somebody has a reason to, be stressed out. Are they stressed out? So I think
so that one, like it's a good question, but at the same time, with what Walk the Talk America deals with, revolves around, it seems a little dark. And
right.
At the same time, like these are things that we have to deal with. But I don't know, it almost jumps out to me like, hey, if you weren't successful battling your demons, do you have a way to take care of these things? And like, is
I didn't think of it that way. Like in this context, yeah, that totally makes sense. I didn't even think about it. Sitting right there, yeah.
Yeah, and then is that a vibe they're going for? Like, yeah, because I understand you can't save everybody, but at the same time, like that's kind of their goal. Like, yeah, we want to get resources out so you can win this battle, and that last one's just like I said, it's a good question. I just don't know if it's a good question for them to present. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great. I know it's tough. I'm throwing this at you guys the first time, so it's a great way to. That's what I was hoping for. I think maybe as I'm thinking about it, I think a way to present this, because I'm thinking again that I'm never going to read this. Like if you want me to look at this or absorb this, it's got to be some pictures, and on one piece of paper, one side of a piece of paper, right? I'm not flipping a piece of paper over for something like this. Now, if I'm hurting, if I know somebody who is, totally different, right? But just a regular person, we're just trying to get information across to the general public, like a billboard, right? Bullet points, just a couple of pictures. So what I'm thinking is maybe a way to present this is, hey, we all know that we have a plan for what we're going to do with our firearms if we pass away, because everybody does. Everybody has some sort of a will, even if it's just on their head, right? Somebody's got some sort of an idea of like a will. So I would say, since that one is they're including it anyway, maybe put that at the front and use it as a leverage and say, since we all have a plan for when we pass, do we also have a plan for if something changes in our lives? Like if we are going to be fighting something. And I'm going to say they stayed away from saying something like depression or anything specifically, maybe in some of the examples, but even then I don't think they said any like specific diagnoses or anything. But I think there might be a way to express this, like maybe there's a reason not to, but maybe there's a way to express it like that, like, because just talked about how do I plan to stay mentally healthy. That's a big ask right off the bat, because I think a lot of people aren't even thinking about that. So, but if it said something like, do you ever think about depression, or do you know anybody who's depressed? Because I think there's an angle that, I don't know if this is healthy or not, but an angle of, hey, we're talking about an illness, but we don't have to talk about your illness. We can talk about this person who has an illness, like this other person, this person who has an illness. I don't know if you guys don't have any insight on that, but something like that. Like, how would you deal with depression in our community or something? So now you're like helping your friends out, you're helping your brothers and sisters out.
Because this is a form that I'd be interacting with personally, I don't feel that any of these questions are too personal. And if I am seeking this kind of survey or have run across it, as I answer that first question, it is sort of with the assumption that I have thought about these things. And again, I might say it after just now, again, that these are for thought provoking. And one thing that I want to put out like up front is, I wonder if they are going to include something like a progress meter, because you're talking about like wanting pictures. It's like, I'm not going to go through all this but I think there are a lot of people like that. And so if there, I think that progress meters are one of those things that help people to get through forms kind of thing. Now, if this is only to be one page, a single interactive HTML form, I get why that might not be as plausible, as workable kind of thing. But another thing would be, I can't tell from what's showing on the screen, are there any hypertext characters or links that are provided in each one of those, or at the beginning, end, anywhere?
We're getting feedback from them right now, but I got the impression it was, and maybe I just assumed this from one of the podcasts or something, but I got the impression this was like a piece of paper that's going into either the gun shops or maybe even with manufacturers that participate and include it with the items.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what I was kind of thinking would be neat if that could happen, where it's kind of like a pamphlet, just like, you know, all the manufacturers were including stuff to join the NRA. Like, how cool would it be if, you know, just this stuff could be included with, you know, just a couple of big manufacturers, Taurus, Ruger, Smith and Wesson, you know, and perhaps others join on, but at the same time, I'm almost willing to bet those manufacturers probably aren't going to want to help put the bill on the you know, printing of all those, and that's more money that's, you know, somebody's got to stuff those boxes. So, and with them being a nonprofit, I don't know how feasible that would be.
You're saying to make them printed?
Yeah, like a pamphlet to go inside the
far
box of every new firearm.
Right. Like so far, it's been a 4x8, something like that, 4x6 card,
or even that, you know.
Print.
But to, you know, to just stick it in the box every new firearm that's sold, you know, straight from the manufacturer, because, you know, what, half a decade ago, it seemed like every gun that I purchased had a little pamphlet and it said, join the NRA, you know. Why couldn't the same thing be done with these other than cost prohibitions?
Right, and that's where I think it's just a matter of getting a deal from a printer and then having maybe a manufacturer take on some of it or all of it. I don't know how that works, but yeah, assuming it gets facilitated or whatever, and it's happening, then it's like, what should the thing look like? Or in this case, again, well, since Walk Talk America is watching right now live, I may ask them, what is the focus? I guess I misunderstood, or I just don't understand. DJ was wondering, is this like an online form, and we're looking at the questions that would be asked like on a interactive page of the website type of thing, or like what I was thinking in barbecues, talking about like a card or something that would be used to, what's the word, like incite question or inquisit, like DJ saying, like to create a pause, as you'd say, to think about these things.
And I just made that assumption and shouldn't have, that this, because I'm seeing it on the web or interacting with it through the World Wide Web, that it would be a web-based thing. But now that I'm thinking about the print version of this, I'm going to think a little bit harder. Two-prong attack instead.
So this America says the healthcare community has watched Mike speak about this type of thing and developed their own plan. And that, I suppose, would be good or bad, I suppose, because Walk Talk America is out there with that goal of, you know, offering insight to the firearm segment to healthcare professionals, and if they use that insight and created a health plan that, you know, understands that or works within that, is that what I'm saying? Then that'd be fine. But if they're tone deaf or whatever the word is, then that could be frustrating. But if this, I'm assuming then that the goal here is to create one that is opportune or is ideal. So getting back to, they've explained further that we wanted to provide this resource with questions we encourage gun owners to answer before it's needed.
Okay, so
And then,
as a prophylactic measure, almost kind of thing, I have a great appreciation for that, because as many of these questions that we don't ask ourselves until we find ourselves faced with something so dramatic that we are turning to others for answers. And if we could have some of those things addressed individually before we get to crisis point, that's a great idea. I fully support that.
if this is designed, well, we still have the question of how does it get to the end user, right? Is it a piece of paper that's on the table at a gun shop? Is it a card that's in with a piece of item that you purchased? Or is it a poster on the wall? Or is it something on the web that you're directed to at the end of a podcast? Or like Ghost Tactical has a show tonight. You know, if he said, hey, check out Walk Talk America, they've got a mental health plan, you know, it would be like a URL, like DJ kind of assumed at the beginning. In either case, I'm going to go back to images. Like, hopefully there's going to be a lot of images in here. An image that can get 70% of the point across, and then a little bit, you know, bullet title, thumbnail type of titles to hone it in and put a point on it. We were talking earlier, I don't know if you heard, but the last point about if you pass away being a final thing that everyone has to deal with, I kind of thought that might be something that put at the beginning and use that as a pivot. You know, since we all have a plan for what we do when we pass, some sort of a will, what do we do if our situation changes? Do we have a plan for that? And then, you know, talk about like, hey, what if someone comes back from a stressful situation and they're just not quite the same, you know, for a while? Do you have a plan for that? What if you come back from a situation and you're not right for a while? You know, so maybe something like that, but with, you know, the person having a conversation at the range, you know. And then I was also, well, I'm going to let these guys talk again, and then I'll read. Wait, I guess I should read Walk Talk America's, and then I'll let you guys chime in again. So they said, and I don't know if we're talking to Mike or who we're talking to. Correct. All gun owners prepare for a home break-in. We want to encourage gun owners to do some prep work to stay healthy. This will be on our resource page, and let those who want to print it out and fill it out for themselves. The web page has more detail. Okay, so now we know this is a web resource. I'll shut up.
Well, smart. And one thing that I know that we don't talk about all that often in gun spaces is mental health. That's one of the reasons the three of us are dedicated to this, and WTTA exists. And the point that what was stated by WTTA out there in the text chat earlier made me think, yes, the safety and security of our firearms also includes our personal safety and security. Are we safe in our head? Are we safe in our actions? Are we secure in our thoughts about these things? And that has an influence over the greater community and not just the gun community. So I'll pass it over to Barbecue with that. And if there are more resources out there for me to take a look at and to be able to refer others to, up to and including this page or anything else that's generated from it, heck yeah, I'm going to use it. And there are places and spaces where I go now where I'm not sure that I'm always so well received, but I know that the information will be by at least one or a few other people, no matter how small the conversation is. And sometimes it is through repetition that these ideas are communicated finally, or finally somebody has a breakthrough with what it is that anybody is trying to get at when it comes to mental health. Go ahead.
Barbecue might have walked away. He's had a phone call he had to make. But I just was sending a link over to Walk Talk America's Instagram. I don't know if you got access to that. Otherwise, what email I should send it to, I can send you a link. If you're interested, if you have the time. I realize we're doing this. I do these on Tuesday mornings, mainly so that I can be the opening act for Cape Gunworks does the 2A Tuesday segment of Grace Curley's show on Tuesdays usually. So I try to do this show in the mornings so that I can send people over there. It also gives me a chance to do one of the shows during the week, during the day. So I know it's in the middle of the day for most people. But thanks to all the people that are joining in. Ghosts out there. RTAC is saying hey. And what we're doing is we're talking about a mental health plan that Walk Talk America is constructing. Their goal is to provide the, they say the intersection between mental health profession and gun owners, teaching the mental health professionals what gun owners are all about and why gun owners have had issues with their profession over the years. And then vice versa, helping gun owners realize that understanding mental health is the same as understanding if we have a sore shoulder, we're not going to shoot well. If we don't eat right, we're not going to shoot well, right? Like there's all kinds of things about health that we are comfortable talking about. Mental health, for whatever reason, probably because it's difficult to diagnose. You know you have a broken arm. You know if you have the flu or something. You might bicker about what strain of the flu you've got, but if you're feeling depressed and something, that's tougher to diagnose, I guess. But whatever, it's just a societal thing. And we can blame whoever we want, but it's just the way that it is. We just don't have that comfort yet. But like anything, with intent and with effort, you can create more awareness, normalize it, and achieve a comfortable, what do you call it? An awareness of mental health, I guess, and an ease of conversation with it.
And similar to the physical, you brought us over to the physical world and, diagnosing those sort of things. Sometimes it is an accumulation of symptoms, both physical and mental, that get to the point where there is a break or a crisis or some other, even call for introspection, personal introspection kind of thing, as well as community. And I think that sometimes, well, I know that I don't know about you two guys, but I think I know that when somebody says responsible gun ownership, we kind of bristle a little bit, because what I think is responsible might not apply to the next person. For example, I live alone. I only allow people into my house knowingly, right, that I want to have here and who are going to be safe around any firearms that they may come upon, kind of thing. If I have anybody else in my house, I make sure that my standard meets that which would be equal roughly to what they might experience in public. Things are going to be secure. Does that mean I got them in a lockbox or a safe? No, not always. And so there are different levels of responsibility, personal responsibility, when it comes to firearm ownership. The same thing, I think, applies to people saying, oh, well, you need to get a head check on your mental health. You need to be responsible about your mental health. Well, one person's goose is a different person's gander, or however else you want to toss it out there. The same thing. Not everything is one size fits all. So again, going back to maybe that first point, and then I'll try not to make it again, any of these things as subject for conversation, whether internal or external, is a great first step. It's getting past that into the resources needed or desired, and getting those connections made. I think that's the next most important step. When it comes to how to be responsible about things, there's already been a question about secure storage, and that's why I gave that example of my own take, as well as my own environment for which that take is appropriate, or at least I would like to think it's appropriate. And I might have a hard time if somebody told me that it wasn't, kind of thing. So I don't think that any of these questions are being overly presumptive. I just think that they're worthwhile. Got to pass it back.
So we don't have any new feedback from the audience or anything. So now that we know, though, that this is something that they're going to be pointed to from as a web resource.
Just want to tell everybody, no worries. You will not find any firearms in Terry's house. They're all strategically hidden behind guitars. And there's a lot of guitars. Yes, there are. and I'm responsible about their ownership, their use, and their storage, or at least I would like to think so. Since we now know this is going to be something, or at least is indicated in the text chat, that can be seen on the web or printed off and used. And there was also mention that other healthcare providers have generated their own after hearing Mike speak about things. If possible, I'd like a little more elucidation on what that might be, because I don't want to misinterpret it. Because of the suggestion that I would make, which is, if any one of those people who, the persons out there who are making their own forms kind of thing becomes a part of the consultation within this, I would encourage that.
completely, because there's a lot of hard work and a lot of hard thinking that goes into things that I wouldn't have thought about, that the three of us might not have thought about, that anybody gathered out there, as well as a WTTA rep who's out in the text chat, might not have thought about or done any investigation on. We only become, barbecue's fond of saying, like, iron sharpens iron, iron sharpens steel, whatever that combination of elements and metals is. And I think that it's the same thing with people in mental health and people who want to promote mental health awareness, and that we do, like every Saturday, violence prevention. So any small step on the way to a greater success, I think, is worth it. And I'm glad that it's going to be web-based at a minimum, but I really like Barbecue's take on, was this going to be in print? Is this going to be inserted? How can some of the cost or responsibility be spread out so that it's not only one organization and its limited resource trying to basically to prop up an entire industry. So I know I made a couple of different points in there, and I'm starting to ramble a little bit, so I'm going to go hush for a second.
So I don't know what happened to Barbecue, if he can stick around or not, but he left. So, like say he's got a phone call or something, so he might be back. I was going to ask before I forget it, because I don't know where to put it in here. So this, I'm looking at the thing, and if it's going to go online, I'm still going to stick to, it's a lot to read. But if you're in need, you're going to read, right? So if you're not in need, you're just brushing by, you need something like a thumbnail, you need something like a billboard sign or something, right? Something to catch the eye and to retain. Because there's catch the eye, oh, it's interesting, but then there's catch the eye and retain for later, and that's valuable. I think that's what you've been mentioning. But now on the other side of it, if someone's in need and they're, not aware, what's the word, fluent or like comfortable with the topic, or they're new to it or whatever, and they're looking for those kind of answers and stuff, then I think they're going to read, right? Then they've got more, probably at least they've got more to read. Like I don't know, but I guess that's what I'm getting at. So my question would be then, for me to explain something I've never done before, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something I've never done before, like play some sports. I could give you some BS, right? I could try to act like I've played the sport before based on what I've seen people play the sport or watched a movie or something, or heard people allude to it. But, I've never fallen in the grass or got smashed or broke something or whatever happens when you play sports, right? So I could never really play it off like I know what's going on. So do you need people who have gone through some shit and are aware of how to talk to people who are going through some shit to write this kind of stuff when you're seriously going through some stuff? And then does that apply to this? If this is, hey, are you feeling good? Like, do this every 6 months, and here's the questions. Then it's like, why would you want to do this? Like, people don't brush their teeth, they don't do all kinds of stuff. Why are they going to do this? So I'm thinking, is this for people who are actually going through some stuff? And in that case, should it be subtly, if that's the right word, like, a nod to people, like written by people who are actually going through it? Or is it already that way and I just don't understand that? Because I'm just thinking, I've been stressed out before, but I've never thought of, I'm going to go online and look at a resource because I'm stressed out right now. I'm not the person that's targeted for, or that is in the circumstances in 2024 where this is a resource that I was aware of it before. You know what I mean? Like, once this is something that people know about in 2025 and they're going through some shit, they know about this, right? Is that person going to need, what I'm saying? I don't know. Am I wasting my time?
I do. No, I'm following along with several of the points that you just made. I don't see this as a form for intervention. I think that the splash page and other things are more targeted to that. I think that the way that this promotes the internal conversation, at least to me, reflects that. And then jumping to another, is it useful to have people who have gone through this before? I think that sometimes testimonials, even if they're well curated from genuine conversations or written things, that they can be useful, but only if they're really, really brief. And in a time like this, I'm not sure that anybody wants to hear, or at least I wouldn't always want to hear from somebody else. or at least identified on a page like this as being someone that I should be able to relate to. Because if I don't, at a minimum, it's going to be disregard. And at a maximum, it's going to be persons taking offense, I guess. That would not be me. I wouldn't. But I'm trying to, to get a spectrum out there.
You're really emotional, right? Like you're going to be maybe offended.
You know,
this ain't for me. I got to go somewhere.
I think it more promotes further investigation and personal consideration than intervention. I guess I could have stated it a little bit more simply, G.
And I guess I don't think we're talking just to fill time here, but at the same time, I don't know what else to, as far as without actually going through each of the items individually and applying some kind of a test to it. I think the question was, can you give us an opinion on this? Let me know if we've missed or if you see any language issues. So with that specifically, let me go back to what Walk Talk America had added here. When we asked before, where you asked them to ask about what did they mean about the healthcare community's efforts missed? So they said the issue is that some of the healthcare community efforts miss a little. For example, they advise to store guns and firearms separately, or store guns and ammunition separately, so with them an instant turnoff for gun owners. And that's kind of what I meant. That's an obvious one for us as gun owners. We know that when someone tells us to store even if they don't say magazines, if they say ammunition and guns separately, it just tells us that they barely know the mechanisms of guns, but they definitely don't know how people use them or how they work or how they're safe or not, and that kind of thing. Like, so that's somebody saying store your automobile and your gasoline separately for safety in the garage. It's just a silly thing that most people aren't going to regard as actual advice. And that kind of, there's nothing like that in here. I don't see, but like I say, under stress, I guess maybe that's the way I should have said it. Like, is someone who's under stress going to see this as clinical and, I don't have time
a waste
for
of
this.
time?
Yeah. Maybe, or I can't do that.
I do believe, because if an intervention, if we're up to that point, it's like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, if they see like a picture of a vet or a picture of, somebody stressed out with another situation or a third situation, and they can relate to something in those photos or something in those scenarios, that they can go, oh, wait a minute, maybe I need to.
That's a good shorthand. That's a good shortcut to having like little testimonials or something. Because if there is, like this fits this demographic, that demographic, just a little pastiche of photos could, I think, do that almost as effectively, and perhaps more effectively, especially when we're talking about the time to read versus the time to recognize through a picture, sort of thing. And like rolling just back really quick to, as if it's not a means of intervention, that it's a means of further consideration kind of thing. Like I will say in person, or I will put in every chat that I'm in that allows it. If you are in crisis, dial 988, dial 211 if you like the old system, dial 800-273-TALK. If you don't want to talk, you can text 741-741, if I remember it correctly. And those are that, like, to me, that's the second line, really. That's not first line, because first line is yourself and those in your immediate surroundings. It might be family members who are absent from your physical location, but I like to try and include them too. So yourself, your tight family, and friends, those who you would refer to first before seeking anything elsewhere. There's a catch, because we're talking about firearms. And it's already a taboo already among majority males. Mental health is a taboo subject. It's also not something that our society wants to deal with. Men and their stresses, really get over it, guys, or some shit like that. So when we're at a point of that kind of stress where a person does need to reach out, that's one of the times they're going to be most reticent to do so from the people that are closest to them, because they don't want to come off as being a wimp or unable to control their emotions, or their own property kind of thing. And I don't think that anybody, when they're in their clear or, quote unquote, right mind, would think that of themselves, or at least be able to admit it to themselves or to others that were the case. So you have a subject mated with something that's already taboo. I'm going to roll in another one, and that is that firearms ownership is supposed to be extant when you're filling out a 4473, at least, of a mental health issues, and any medications that might be associated with that. Now, it's supposed to be illegal, and I don't want to derail the conversation to go into those states that do allow people to seek relief from temporary mental stresses through substances that 4473 doesn't allow, but it exists. So to me, that's a threefold strike against people in particular, because I'm like kind of ruling out an individual by description, someone who is male, someone who owns firearms, someone who has an issue either immediately or long-term, and the ability to talk about or discuss. So a forum like this coming to a person like that who's simply out there doing some investigation because they themselves, of their own volition, they're seeking out WTTA or other such resources for information because they anticipate either being in a situation that might require those kind of considerations and plans to be put in place, or they're trying to gather it for other folk. I come in on the second side of that. I am grabbing some of this for other folk. It'll become yet another thing that I have in my toolbox to hand people. And I also think, and I'll pass it back to you after this, that a simplified form like this, with the links provided to other parts of the site or other outside resources, I think that's a way to bridge the gap between somebody who is just looking for information and someone who's seeking not quite an intervention, but may need it before they're able to finish out the quiz or the considerations and their context. It's a hard thing to navigate when you're in the middle of a crisis. Yeah.
All right. So we got clarification, and you pretty much are going to say the same thing, or said the same thing I'm going to say. This is, so Walk Talk America said, this is being designed as a prevention tool, not an intervention tool. So this isn't, well, you're feeling stressed, go take this test. Like, see where you are on the scale or something. It's not that type of thing. This is Smokey Bear message, like, hey, prevent forest fires, right? Not what to do when the forest is burning down. So in that case, I am going to agree with what DJ essentially said there, I think, for the most part, which is, and I put it up here as my notes. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I put the same thing, help others first. So I wouldn't not put this up here. I don't know anybody who's healthy is going to go, how do I treat my broken arm? I don't know anybody that's healthy that goes, how do I put a tourniquet on myself? We have to be told to put a tourniquet on ourselves. All we care about is putting a tourniquet on the person who's hurt. We never get hurt. The other person gets hurt. So I would definitely put this in more of or my personal, and if I'm allowed to offer this suggestion, I would put it in how to help other people. So how to, same thing, like I would still go with the will and thing first, the ultimate. We all have to deal with the ultimate. What are we going to do with our guns when we pass? So since you either have taken that on or you haven't, let's think a little bit further about this. What if something changes in our lives? What if your brother, real brother or brother through work or circumstances, right? What if your teammates, your brothers, your crew, something happens with one of their family members? What if something happens with an accident and they're physically changed? And have you thought about this kind of stuff? Do you have a plan in place? Do you have a network of people? And what do they do if XYZ happens? What if something happens to somebody's kids? So I would change these questions up. Your next question, Walk Talk America, was a question for you guys. Is there a question that you would like to see added? If I see this as preventative, like a Smokey Bear type of thing, then I'm going to stick with, I would make it more of, here's what you would do as a first responder. And it has nothing to do with you being injured. Now it is, what do you do with your community and your friends that are injured? What do you do with your family and your coworkers that were injured? And, like a triage thing. So we all know what to do with our will, or at least bring that up with people once in a while, bring it up with your group. As far as like, do you store your firearms responsibly? what does responsible for storage for firearms look like for your crew, right? And now you just have that discussion. So nobody's going to say yes or no, I store my firearms responsibly, but have you had a conversation with your people, with your team, with your family, with how you store firearms? And when you start teaching kids, and what's the difference between a BB gun and a real gun? I guess in nowadays, what's the difference between a BB gun and, or I mean, a video game gun and a real gun? When's the transition and when to start, I mean, I would think there has to be a valid discussion. And I mean, in all seriousness, when you would take a kid to go experience a real gun, like let's say Machine Gun Vegas or someplace where you can rent a whole bunch of video game guns, because a little kid that goes experiences Machine Gun Vegas as a little kid is never going to play video games the same way, right? They're going to understand how a gun works and they're going to be fighting that. But a little kid who wants to play video games really good, just like you wouldn't go drive a race car if you're trying to play video game race cars, right? Like you wouldn't want to know how a real race car works because that would hurt you. You'd want to only know how your video game race car works. So I imagine there's probably going to be discussions like that. When do you take a kid? Is it hurting a kid's video game potential if you let them shoot a real gun? Like, is that going to be a thing? Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe if you go shoot a real gun, you'll shoot video games and you'll play video games better from the get-go. And I'm just picking that because that's an emerging issue.
Oh no, and I'm relating to that strongly. And welcome back to barbecue. So taking the video game example and turning it back into this form, two things. I think that at the very top kind of thing, and I wasn't able to peruse the form before this show, so I don't know if it's already included. Forgive me if it is, but some sort of statement that says, that if you are in crisis, boom, and here's where the site would like you to go if that's you in this moment. And then sort of a transition. If not, well, hey, stick around for these, for these interesting, thought-provoking questions. It's not that exactly, but I think that at least for indemnity's sake, there needs to be something like that. Don't want any bad stories, or ill things to happen because someone didn't understand what's on a form. I think so. Clarity, of purpose and intent, I think needs to be right up there towards the top, as well as driving traffic from this to an appropriate resource. So although it's, hosted at WTTA, are there places or spaces that they refer out to? And again, I'll go back to one of my favorite parts of this conversation, which is hypertext links. Please provide them. People are so used to instantaneous action when they want something known, or they want instant action when they're calling for it. They don't want to delay. Some people don't want to read a paragraph. Some people don't want to listen to me for 5 minutes. Distill it, break it down, DJ. What can you say in 5 seconds, 15 seconds, or 50 seconds instead of your 5 minutes? And so I think ways to direct the traffic coming in to the appropriate resources on the way out. I'll pass it back.
So thanks for jumping back in barbecue. We're talking to Walk Talk America out there, and they essentially said that this is an online resource, so it's going to be part of the website, and it's not for someone who's having an issue, like not for someone who's stressed out or needing help at the moment. It's more of like a prevention awareness tool.
Okay, so I saw that there's a question up there from them asking, what's a question that you would like to see asked? And I thought of one, and I don't know if they'd want to roll with something like this. And mine would actually be a 2 or 3 part question. One, it would be, do you know somebody who has ever self-harmed? Then the second part would be, what do you think would be steps that they could have taken to get help? And third part of that would be, then if you ever found yourself in a similar situation, would you be willing to take those steps?
Take which steps?
Whatever steps you answered in part 2.
Okay.
Have you ever met? Did you ever know anybody? What did they do? What would have you done? That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or what didn't they do that you think would have helped them from not doing part 1?
But I think I like that way, that transition in, because then it's like we start thinking about it, we think about the consequences of whatever happened, and then apply it to yourself, right? And focus it back. So we had talked about, at least my thing was that question about what to do when you pass should be closer to the front because it's kind of separate than the rest of the questions. And I thought it would be a good way to leverage in by saying, well, since we all know that's an eventuality for everybody, what about some of these other eventualities that don't apply to everybody, but they might, and you never know. Have you thought about them? And then that gets it out of the way and gives everybody like a common place to start looking. But then they said, and then we started, and so anyway, then I started saying that I think that it's, and I think DJ agrees that instead of making it a questionnaire, more of a, here's some things you can do to help other people, or some things you can do to find, to look, I don't know, to see in others, things to look for in others, I guess. So that it's more of how to prevent fire instead of how to put out a fire, right? And in that case, I was, by projecting it to like how you can help people, you're going to have this idea in your head of like the issue itself.
And I had a thought like that. However, I do like the form of the questionnaire where it's thought-provoking. It gets people thinking. Because at the end of the day, what's one of the things that we always talk about when we're talking about two-way? If you have a conversation with somebody or anything like that, you don't have to win the conversation. You don't have to win the argument or anything else. You just got to plant the seed. And this questionnaire plants the seed. And by planting that seed, then if somebody is struggling or something like that, they may think back, oh, yeah, there is that thing. And, maybe I should look into this more. And then they seek out that help. Likewise, I think if you just make it like, here's this or here's that, it's almost, especially if you're talking about somebody who, which I realize that's not necessarily what they're going for, but let's say somebody who is struggling were to stumble upon this, and if you're just like, here's this, here's that, does it push them away because they're just being told, well, this is what you need to do, instead of letting them, venture into it? And something I thought was perhaps blend the two, where they have this on their website and people can maybe click an answer, and depending on what they click, pulls up a resource.
Nice. I like that touch. Now, this is just to spitball and workshop this a little bit. Barbecue, I was listening, and G clarified for me kind of what was going on with what you stated there. I have a little bit of concern about that second part. The do you know somebody who has unlived themselves kind of thing.
I just said
I don't. Okay, self-harm, quote unquote.
That way it's broader.
Understood. I don't know that I would want, responding personally, I don't know that I would want to be drawn into a further existential crisis because I have to consider something like somebody else's, some person that I knew quite well, actually, is the first person that's going to pop into my mind every time. And I'm only ever going to see them hanging from the noose that they fashioned themselves. That's not going to help me. I'm not saying that's for everybody. That's why I'm internalizing it here. And Barbecue, you know me well enough to know what I'm referring to here. So that's the kind of person I'm worried about. That's a concern that I have. Go ahead.
You don't have to think about exactly. It's simply just a question of, part one is, do you know somebody who has self-harmed? Yes or no. And it's not like you have to confess that to anybody, or you can just internalize that and go, yes, okay. So then you go to part two, and the part two is, what are some things that you think could have helped them avoid doing that action? And you could say, talking to somebody, perhaps, whatever in the world it is that you come up with answers there, whether you internalize them, you write them down, whatever, like, cool. Then part three of that question is, if you ever found yourself in a mental state where you wanted to do something similar, would you take those steps to help yourself?
I like the way you ended that more than one of the things that was kind of in tandem with the second part of the thing that you said previously. So without getting too confused here, I still have, and I'll just leave it at this, man. I still think it's a little, it's got a little bit of a twist for me when the person who is seeking this information then becomes responsible for imagining what it was that the person who has self-harmed themselves could have done to not do it. I think that at least, I guess I'll only answer for myself again and hope that it has a broader application, and certainly not in sorrow. But
well, anything that has a reaction is probably indicative of more than one person, so it's a valid to some extent. And
yeah,
it's not like this thing rests on this thing. Darbic just brought it up, so that's fine.
Yep,
no doubt. I thought we were just spitballing. I'm good.
That's a terrible question. Like, what are you thinking? Like, who knows? So,
but then, so anyway, I was kind of explaining though that what we've been doing here and learning from Walk Talk America's answers here. So I was suggesting that I would put it up as a how to prevent forest fires, since it's not a how to put out forest fires. I would put it out as how to prevent forest fires, and you don't tell somebody how to prevent forest fires by saying, like, well, at least you don't. Most people don't accuse the person who's reading the poster of creating the forest fire. They try to give them the opportunity to prevent forest fires, or to do things that are safer. Anyway, so I would say it's more of a like, how do you, or have you thought of the mental health of your whatever peer group, community, family, shooting team, club, whatever it is. And then that way the person is thinking about it. They're seeing that, like, I care about this issue in the gun community, right? Mental health awareness. So what can I do? Well, I can think about my group, my people, is there anything out there that I'm aware of? And then, how do we store our guns? Have we ever had a conversation about it? Not what's right or wrong, or do I do it, but, have you started a conversation about it? Have you had conversations about it? The next question is about where would you deal with what you're in a temporary crisis? So maybe a question in there would be more like, if someone in your group is having a temporary crisis, have you had a conversation on what the group can do to help with that? And now it becomes, yeah, I'm aware of these 5 or 10 bullet points, but instead of, because I don't know too many people that are going to, again, go like, I wonder how my dental health is. I'm going to take a screening on my dental health, or I'm going to take a screening on my foot care. I'm going to take a screening on my butt or something. Like, most people aren't going to do this unless they feel sore or they've been told to, right? Or they get a discount on their toothbrush or something if they do it. So if it's, how do we, if we get somebody who's interested in this concept or this aspect of our community, instead of just saying, hey, how do you deal with it? What if it's empowering and like, how is your community dealt with it? How is your group dealt with it? Is it normalized in your group? Here's some ways that you can think about that. And now the person understands that it's here. They came here to the website in the first place. They were directed to it. A conversation was done on a podcast like this about it. But instead of saying, hey, go check your eyesight, go check your hearing, go check your hair quality or whatever, whatever. Now it is, hey, you want to add something to your community? Go check out these resources and bring them to your community. And maybe it's like having a deck of cards or something, some stickers or something on the back of the stickers. They have the question, what do you do in a temporary crisis? What if somebody gets stung by bees and they have to be taken to another state because that's the only place, or maybe stung by a snake or something and they have to be taken to another state to get the anti-venom? What's going to happen with their guns when they're out of state? What's going to happen with their NFA items? Ask a cool question, and then, like, start asking these questions and stuff. And then, where do you have these conversations? At the range? Do you have them at the gun shop? Do you have them at the gun show? That kind of thing. And anyway, that was where I was getting at. And I'm just repeating myself to some extent, but that's where I was getting at. And then Walk Talk America came in from the chat. And of course, there's lag and everything else. but they said in the group that was developing this comparison was made. The best time to decide on what you personally want and DNR, do not resuscitate, is when you're in a good space of mind. Some of these questions are meant to have a resource if a medication or something else alters your mental state, like a QR code or the 988 resource that will be added as in the final draft. They're focusing now on the questions and if they're in the right
Nice.
order. So in other words, I think to address what DJ's saying, yeah, they're going to use the tech to include links or logos and stuff to give people okay, this was an issue, so boom, here you go. But I just wanted to follow through because they did type all that in there. Then they asked a real question, and I'll let you guys answer this one because I was just kind of rambling there. Would you lead off with would you lead off with that to make the opening question less personal? So I don't know what we were talking about at that time, but
I think they might be. Oh, at first I was taking it as they're talking about with what you suggested as the leadoff question, but
could be. That was 10 minutes ago, and I ranted for a while, and I've said that twice or whatever. It said yours. The leadoff question was on barbecues. Your barbecue question. But your kind of three-way question. Have you known somebody in a crisis? What did they do? What would you?
I mean, I could definitely see it being a leadoff. I think. I mean, if they were going to use it, I think it would have to be a leadoff or an end. I don't know if it would fit in the middle of all that.
No, I think if the two questions are, how do I plan to stay mentally healthy, and do you know someone who's had an issue? Because I don't think it necessarily I didn't, whenever barbecue said that, DJ, I didn't think of a final thing. I thought of somebody who was stressed. I didn't even think about what they did. I just thought about somebody who's stressed, because that happens all the time. And all it takes is being stressed out to be whatever, near a slippery slope, right? So that's when we want to start getting with people and letting them know they have alternatives and stuff. So I guess to answer the question, if the question is, do I plan to stay mentally healthy, or have you known somebody who's been in stress? Boom, I would definitely go with the second, personally.
I like that take just a little bit more than the what did somebody else do or how could they have prevented it kind of thing, because I think that it still answers that question without having to make that consideration. And that's not a slur at barbecue's idea, because it's a damn good one. We're workshopping this, and this is how we get things whittled down kind of thing. And just before you started to read the comments from WTTA on the screen, you move stuff out like one more step away from it being a personal thing. And I think that as a matter of who is being served and is the greater good being reached, I think that, yeah, I am not the person who this form would be targeted at specifically, because I've overthought all of these things or have what I consider is an inordinate amount of experience with this subject matter, personal and otherwise. And so by just having a distance of one step further back for those people who are more casually engaged, I think that's a smart way to go. I think it's a great suggestion. The number of people reached by the intended message. Yep. Good one, guys.
And then they followed up with the end goal was for each individual to put a higher priority on their mental health before reading this. Maybe that would be going to the range one more time a month for some lead therapy. And that's the kind of thing that I think would get people to, what's the word, make it sticky, like bounce it around, like tell people, go into this place and figuring out if you're good to go is one thing, but encouraging others to do the same. So I think having a target or something, and then have this stuff all in the back of a target, and then that target turns into a postal match that you challenge your friends with or something. Like the winner gets something or the loser pays for something kind of thing. The winner picks the next restaurant and the loser pays for the appetizers or something like that. To play a game with it and to get people getting together for the point of maybe let's talk about what's on the back of this target that we all just shot. These issues like, hey, we're all best friends. What happens if one of our wives or something? What happens if one of our kids or something? What happens if one of us?
Flat out, great idea. Flat the hell out. that is a great idea. Anytime you can increase the number of people who are receiving the message and have it be in a safe and clear context, the better it's going to be. Good one, dude.
And then it would just be getting one of the target companies who are, they come and go. So target companies are desperate for affiliations and word of mouth. So having a target company to be able to print in your green, a target on one side and a plan on the other, would be something that then ranges could offer, right? And be on your list or whatever. Good addition to range targets, yeah. I don't know. We've been on for an hour. I don't know what, I wish somebody else would have joined in because we've had some good discussions here, but I feel like, what do we know? We're three people, we're three dudes for one, and we have all chatted with each other a million times. I'm sure there's other people that could offer some insight, but hopefully this was useful to some extent for Walk Talk America and for anybody that might be listening to this and might not have thought about how we normalize the conversation about mental health. How is that accomplished? Wanting it to happen is one thing. Thinking we'd be better off if it was the case is another, but facilitating it, right? Accomplishing it. Anyway, any other things you want to chat before we start kicking the dirt?
Well, I certainly hope it's been successful. I think that it's been successful, at least for my skin in kind of thing. I'm glad you participated in this. I'm glad that WTTA availed you of an opportunity to have this discussion. And I look forward to the comments, not just in the active text chat, because I don't know how much longer the show is going to go, but in the comment section of each of these two channels going forward. And I'll try to make reference back to this on the upcoming, well, I can't do it on this Saturday's show, but in 2 weeks, I'll make a reference back to this on Brooke's show. Thanks, G.
Right on. We can keep chatting for a bit here because I found out that Cape Gunworks does have their show scheduled, so I need to open up some stuff and link it and whatnot. So I don't know if Barbecue's still here, if you've got any.
Yeah, I'm here.
Additional input.
No, I've got nothing. If we're wrapping it up, I'd just like to say thank you for the invite. Thank you to Walk the Talk America for everything that they do and continue to do, and allowing us to have the opportunity to give them feedback on this. I don't want to say new endeavor because it's not an endeavor, but this new idea that they are putting together.
Right on. And yeah, so thanks. They said very useful. Thank you all. We have feedback. We have this feedback round out to a lot of individuals currently. Right on. And anybody that wants to offer some feedback, Walk Talk America is either WTTA or Walk the Talk America on all the different platforms out there. Probably X or Instagram are the ones I communicate with them on most, but they're on a YouTube. Well, almost every week they've got a recording of the live podcast. You can join them live to watch the podcast, be part of it, or watch the final podcast on whatever platform it is that you prefer to listen to the podcast. So if you're listening to us on a podcast right now, which a bunch of you probably are, I encourage you to go find your source, wherever it is you listen to your podcast from. I know you don't go there very often unless you're maybe adding a new one or something. But if you would, go back to wherever it is you listen to your podcast and go to find Walk Talk America's site there or presence there and give them a like, leave a comment. Those actions on a podcast platform are some of the most beneficial you can do for anybody out there that you value. So with Walk Talk America, are there shows that you like? Taking that time to go give them a thumb up or a like or a heart or whatever it is on the, if it's iTunes or if it's iHeartRadio or Stitcher or whatever it is that you might listen to podcasts on. Very few people leave feedback, so that feedback there is very valuable. But thanks everybody for joining us, and you can always listen to Brooke Cheney's show on Saturday. That's almost every Saturday afternoon since 2018, a focus on mental health awareness and normalizing the conversation on these issues. I think all three of us will say that we are better able to discuss these matters thanks to Brooke's effort every week. And then, like I said, in about half an hour, Toby will be going live with Cape Gunworks. Go check that out. It's worth your time every Tuesday. There's a radio show in Boston called Grace Curley Show, and she gives Toby a section of her Tuesday show to do a 2A Tuesday segment. And they have a lot of issues in Massachusetts with being behind enemy lines, just put it lightly. They have a lot of abuses from their state who are trying to show off for the rest of the country. But owning a gun shop and hosting a show for so long, Toby does a great job of monitoring the chat and keeping everybody entertained and educated. So it really is an enjoyable show, and it's interactive. It's one of my favorite shows to listen to each week. So thanks everybody for listening to us. Let's see, what's the next show? It's coming up after that. Probably there's a bunch of member-only shows. Ghost is live tonight. Chris will have a show on Thursday, I'm sure. Anyways, thanks everybody for joining. Put a commercial here at the end.
Captain, a vessel approaching.
On screen.
We're being hailed.
Every weekend over at gearwebsites.com, our online store, we have free Patch Friday. And that means that every order placed on our store on Fridays is going to include at least one free patch. So that's every order with no coupons, no minimum order, no codes needed. You place the order on Friday, and when it arrives to you, it's going to have at least one free patch. Your support means a lot to us, and financial support is critical. So thanks again to the people who keep us online through purchases at gearwebsites.com.